The scent hit me fur-strong, twisted, like copper pennies left to rust in stagnant water. My wolf stirred uneasily beneath my skin as I crouched behind the fallen oak, every instinct screaming at me to run. But Cassandra's patrol had been missing for 3 days, and as the pack's tracker, finding her was my responsibility. The forest felt different here, older somehow, as if the very trees recoiled from whatever had passed through. Broken branches marked a trail of violence through the underbrush, claw marks scored deep into bark, too savage to be from any ordinary predator. The metallic stench grew stronger as I followed the destruction, my enhanced senses picking up layers of horror-fierce sweat, spilled blood, and beneath it all, something else. Something that made my wolf pace frantically, desperate to flee. I found Cassandra 20 yards ahead, or what remained of her. The sight drove me to my knees, bile burning my throat. She'd been torn apart with methodical cruelty, her body positioned like a warning. But it was the claw marks that made my blood freeze too large for any wolf in our pack, edged with the distinctive serrated pattern that marked only one thing: rogue. Well, well, little tracker found her prize. The voice slivered from the shadows, carrying with it the reek of madness and decay. I spun, already shifting, but the rogue was faster. It emerged from behind a cluster of pines, and I understood immediately why Cassandra never stood a chance. This wasn't just any rogue, this was what remained of what had once been a powerful alpha, twisted by years of isolation and the venom that coursed through its veins. Standing nearly 8 feet tall on hind legs, its form flickered between wolf and something far worse. Patches of fur had fallen away, revealing mottled skin that wept a black substance. Eyes that had once held intelligence now burned with insatiable hunger. Marcus sent his best tracker after me, it continued, circling with predatory grace. How thoughtful. I was getting bored with just that little female's screams. Rage flared through me at the casual dismissal of Cassandra's suffering. My shift completed in a surge of fury, bones lengthening and reshaping as my wolf form exploded outward. I launched myself at the creature, claws extended, but it moved like liquid shadow. Pain erupted along my ribs as its claws found flesh, tearing through fur and muscle with horrifying ease. I rolled away, blood streaming, but the rogue pursued with relentless intensity. Its movements were erratic, unpredictable. The madness that consumed it made it impossible to anticipate. Each swipe of its claws came closer to ending me, and I realized with growing horror that I was outmatched. This thing had been hunting for decades, growing stronger with each kill, each drop of innocent blood it spilled. Desperation drove me to take risks, darting in close to snap at its throat. My jaws closed on foul-tasting flesh, and for a moment I thought I'd found my opening. Then, agony beyond description raced through my system, as the rogue's fangs sank deep into my shoulder, injecting liquid fire into my bloodstream. Rogue venom. Every wolf pup learned about it in their first lessons, about the dangers beyond pack territory. A single bite meant certain deathy, corrupted essence of a rogue's madness spreading through the victim's system until they either died screaming or became another mindless predator. There was no cure, no treatment, no hope of survival. The venom worked quickly, sending waves of nauseating pain through my body as I stumbled backward. The rogue released me with a laugh that sounded like bones breaking, clearly expecting to watch me collapse and begin the horrific transformation that would claim my sanity. "Run home to your precious alpha," it hissed, black saliva dripping from its maw. "Let him watch you die. Let him see what happens to those who dare hunt me." Somehow I managed to shift back to human form, though the effort left me gasping. The bite mark on my shoulder had already turned an ugly purple-black, venomous tendrils spreading beneath my skin like living ink. I had minutes, maybe less, before the poison reached my heart and ended everything. I ran. Through trees that blurred together in my fading vision, over streams that might have been mirages, my body moving on pure instinct while my mind reeled with the knowledge of what was coming. The pack house materialized ahead like a beacon, its windows glowing with worn light that seemed impossibly distant. The front door burst open before I reached it, and Marcus filled the doorway like an avenging angel. 6 feet of corded muscle and barely contained power, our alpha commanded respect without effort. Dark hair fell across storm-grey eyes that could strip lies bare with a glance, and right now, those eyes held a fury that made the air itself tremble. River. My name left his lips in a growl that resonated with authority. He was beside me in an instant, strong arms catching me as my legs gave out. The scent of himpine forests after rain, leather, and something uniquely masculine wrapped around me like a protective shield. "Rogue," I managed to gasp out, fighting to form words through the fire spreading in my chest. "Cassandra, she's dead. The thing that killed her. It bit me." Marcus's grip tightened as he lifted me effortlessly, carrying me toward the pack house with quick, purposeful strides. His beater, Harrison, appeared at his shoulder, face grim with understanding. "How long?" Harrison asked tersely. 10 minutes, maybe 15, I whispered, though it felt like hours since those fangs had pierced my flesh. The venom was moving faster now, each heartbeat pushing it deeper into my system. My vision wavered, darkness creeping in at the edges. Marcus's jaw clenched as he bounded up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. "Not enough time to get you to the healers." I tried to speak, to tell him it wouldn't matter anyway that rogue venom was a death sentence no healer could reverse. But my voice had abandoned me, along with most of my strength. The corridors of the pack house passed in a blur of concerned faces and urgent voices as Marcus carried me to his private quarters. He kicked open the door to his bedroom and laid me carefully on the massive 4-poster bed that dominated the space. Even through my deteriorating condition, I noticed how the room reflected its owner, simple but elegant furniture, books stacked on every available surface, and the lingering scent of his presence in every corner. "What are you doing?" Harrison demanded, as Marcus began stripping off his shirt. "The healers are on their way." "The healers can't save her," Marcus replied, his voice carrying that absolute authority that made his word law. "But I can." Harrison's face went pale. "Marcus, you can't mean a forced bond." Marcus's grey eyes blazed with determination as he turned to face his beater. "It's the only way to fight the venom directly." "That's insane." Harrison stepped forward, genuine fear in his expression. "The risk to you is mine to take." Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that made my weakening wolf whimper in recognition of dominance. She's my pack, my responsibility, my choice. Through the growing haze of approaching death, I understood what he was proposing. A forced bond, the desperate act of an alpha pouring his own life force into a dying pack member through a spiritual connection that transcended normal mate bonds. It could work, theoretically, giving my system the strength to fight off the venom. But the cost would be enormous. If I died anyway, the bond would drag Marcus down with me. And if I lived, we'd be connected in ways that neither of us had chosen, bound together by necessity rather than love. Don't, I whispered, though the word barely escaped my lips. Not worth your life. Marcus knelt beside the bed, his large hands framing my face with infinite gentleness. Up close, I could see the silver flecks in his grey eyes, the small scar along his jaw from a childhood accident, the lines of worry that leadership had etched around his eyes. He was beautiful, in a way that had nothing to do with physical perfection and everything to do with the strength of his character. You are worth everything, he said simply, and something in his tone made my dying heart skip a beat. Trust me, River. Let me save you. I wanted to argue, to spare him the risk, but the venom was winning its battle against my consciousness. As darkness closed in around me, I felt Marcus's hands position themselves over my heart, felt the sudden rush of power as he opened himself to the bond. Heat blazed between us, not the poison fire of the venom, but something clean and pure and infinitely precious. The last thing I remembered was the sound of his voice, rough with strain, as he poured his very essence into keeping me alive. When consciousness returned, it came with the unpleasant realization that I was still breathing. Rogue venom victims didn't wake up, they died screaming or transformed into monsters. Yet here I lay in Marcus's bed, very much alive, if incredibly weak. Pale morning light filtered through the heavy curtains, suggesting I'd been unconscious for hours. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through my shoulder. The bite mark was still there. I could feel the tender flesh pulling with each movement, but something was different. Instead of the spreading black corruption I expected, the wound appeared to be healing normally. Slowly, painfully, but healing nonetheless. You're awake. Marcus's voice came from across the room, and I turned to see him slouched in an armchair by the window. He looked terrible pale and drawn, with dark circles under his eyes, and a haggard expression that spoke of immense strain. But he was alive, which meant the forced bond had worked without destroying him in the process. How? The word came out as a croak, my throat raw and dry. Marcus rose from the chair with careful movements, as if he too was fighting pain. When he approached the bed, I caught a glimpse of something that made my breath catch a mark on his throat, just above his collar, that mirrored the bite on my shoulder. The bond had left its own scar, a permanent reminder of what he'd risked to save me. The bond is holding, he said, settling carefully on the edge of the bed. Your body is fighting off the venom, but it's taking everything you have, and some of what I have. I could feel it, now that I was more aware, a strange doubling sensation, as if part of me existed somewhere else. Marcus's emotions flickered at the edge of my consciousness, muted but present. His exhaustion, his relief, his concern, And beneath it all, something deeper that I wasn't sure I was ready to examine. "This isn't how bonds are supposed to work," I said, struggling to make sense of the connection between us. Normal mate bonds developed gradually, built on mutual attraction and choice. What I was experiencing felt rawer, more immediate-like, being thrown into deep water without knowing how to swim. "No," Marcus agreed, his grey eyes studying my face with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "This is something else entirely. The healers don't know what to make of it. You're alive, but you're not entirely normal." "What do you mean?" Fear crept into my voice. Had the venom changed me in some way? Was I becoming something like the creature that had attacked me? Marcus hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "Your scent has changed. You still smell like you, like Pack, but there's something else underneath. Something that makes my wolf restless." I inhaled deeply, trying to detect what he was referring to, and caught the strangest thing. My own scent had shifted subtly, carrying notes that didn't belong to any normal wolf. Not rogue that carried the reek of madness and corruption. This was something altogether different, wild and untamed, but not evil. Like a storm wind, or the deep places in the forest where sunlight never reached. "And there's something else," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The bond, it's not fading. Usually, emergency healing bonds dissolve once the crisis passes. This one is getting stronger." As if to prove his point, a wave of his emotion washed over me, worry, mixed with something warmer, more complex. I gasped at the intensity of it, my own feelings responding before I could stop them. The connection between us pulsed like a living thing, binding us together in ways I was only beginning to understand. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," I began, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. Don't apologize for being alive." His jaw tightened, that familiar authority creeping into his voice. "The Pack needs you. I need—" He stopped himself, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "This situation is complicated enough without adding guilt to it." A soft knock at the door interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. Harrison entered without waiting for permission, his expression grim as he took in the scene, his alpha sitting on the bed beside a Pack member who should have been dead, both of them bearing the marks of an unprecedented bonding. "The council is here," Harrison announced, and I felt Marcus's spike of tension through our connection. "They want answers about what happened to River, and they've heard rumors about the forced bond." My stomach dropped. The Wolf Council governed all the packs in our region, maintaining the delicate balance between werewolf society and the human world. They had strict laws about forced bonds, mainly that they were forbidden except in the most extreme circumstances. Even then, both parties were supposed to consent. I'd been unconscious, unable to give that consent, which put Marcus in a precarious position. "Tell them I'll be down in a few minutes," Marcus said, rising from the bed with a controlled grace that didn't entirely hide his weariness. "River needs to rest." Actually, Harrison's expression grew more troubled. "They want to see her too, to verify that she's stable." The unspoken meaning hung in the air like a poison cloud. They wanted to make sure I wasn't going to transform into a rogue and slaughter the Pack in my madness. It was a reasonable precaution, I supposed, but the thought of facing the council's scrutiny while I could barely sit up without pain made my wolf whine in distress. Marcus's protective instincts flared through our bond, so strong they took my breath away. "She's barely conscious. Surely the examination can wait." "I'll do it," I interrupted, forcing myself to sit up despite the protest from my injured shoulder. "They need to know I'm not a threat to anyone." Both men looked at me, as if I'd announced my intention to juggle fire, but I met their gazes steadily. The council's concern was legitimate, and putting off the examination would only make things worse. Better to face their questions now, while the evidence of Marcus's sacrifice was still fresh. "Help me get dressed," I said to Marcus, then flushed as I realized how that sounded. "I mean, I need clothes that will cover the bite mark, and something that won't hurt if I have to shift." Marcus nodded, understanding, and moved to his closet while Harrison diplomatically studied the ceiling. From the wardrobe came a soft cotton shirt that would be enormous on my smaller frame, but would adequately cover the bonding marks on both of us. The pack had seen enough scandal for one day. 20 minutes later, I descended the main staircase of the pack house, on unsteady legs, Marcus's steadying hand at my elbow. The council had assembled in the formal meeting room. 3 stern-faced wolves in expensive suits who radiated power and disapproval in equal measure. At their head sat Councilwoman Elena Voss, a silver-haired woman whose wolf was rumoured to be older and more dangerous than any rogue. River Chen. Elena's voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "You look remarkably well for someone who suffered a rogue bite yesterday." "Thank you, Councilwoman." I managed to keep my voice steady, despite the way the 3 council members were studying me like a particularly interesting specimen. "Alpha Marcus saved my life." "Yes, we've heard about that." Elena's pale eyes shifted to Marcus, and I felt his tension spike through our bond. "A forced emergency bond without the recipient's consent. Highly irregular, Alpha Constantine. The council has concerns." "My pack member was dying," Marcus replied, his tone respectful but unyielding. "I acted within my rights as Alpha to preserve pack unity and safety. Did you?" The question came from Councilman Rhodes, a thin man whose wolf was said to be more vicious than his human form suggested. "Because, from where we sit, it looks like you've created something entirely unprecedented. Miss Chen, if you would shift for us." The request sent ice through my veins. Shifting would reveal the true extent of whatever changes the venom and bond had wrought in me, changes I didn't fully understand myself. But refusing would only confirm their suspicions that something was wrong. I stepped away from Marcus, feeling the loss of his supportive presence like a physical ache, and reached for my wolf. The shift that had once been as natural as breathing now felt different, more complex. Power surged through me in ways I didn't recognize, wild and untamed, as my human form dissolved into something else. But when the transformation completed, I remained myself wolf-formed, but rational, aware, unchanged in any way that mattered. My coat had darkened slightly, carrying new depths of colour that seemed to shift in the light, and my eyes held flecks of silver but hadn't been there before. But I was still River, still Pack, still loyal to my Alpha and my people. The council members exchanged meaningful looks that made my hackles rise. Elena leaned forward in her chair, studying me with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "Fascinating," she murmured. "You carry the scent markers of both Packwolf and something else. Not rogue, certainly, but not entirely natural either. Tell me, Miss Chen, do you feel any compulsion toward violence? Any hunger that wasn't there before? I shifted back to human form, grateful when Marcus immediately stepped closer to offer his silent support. No, councilwoman. I feel like myself, just more connected to my alpha than before. The bond, Councilman Rhodes noted, making a mark in the leather portfolio he carried. We'll need to monitor its development. Forced bonds of this nature are unpredictable. They can strengthen over time, potentially affecting judgment and pack dynamics. Fear spiked through me at the implications of his words. Were they suggesting that the bond between Marcus and me could destabilize the entire pack structure? That my survival had somehow endangered everyone I cared about? With respect, Councilman? Marcus's voice carried a warning that made the air itself tremble with his power. The bond is between Miss Chen and myself. It doesn't affect pack hierarchy or our ability to lead effectively. Doesn't it? Elena stood, her movement causing every wolf in the room to tense instinctively. You've bound yourself to a pack member who was exposed to rogue venom. What happens when that connection begins to pull at your own sanity? What happens to your pack when their alpha is compromised by an unprecedented magical bond? That won't happen, I said quickly, stepping forward despite the weakness in my legs. The venom is gone. I'm not going to become a road. Are you certain? Elena's smile held no warmth. Rogue venom has never been successfully purged from a victim's system before. You're alive, yes, but you're also something that has never existed in our recorded history. An unknown quantity with unknown potential for danger. The words hit me like physical blows. In saving my life, Marcus had created a problem that the Council saw as a threat to werewolf society itself. I was an anomaly, a living question mark that challenged everything they thought they knew about rogue corruption and the limits of alpha power. I propose a probationary period, Elena continued, her pale eyes never leaving my face. 6 months of close monitoring, with regular examinations to ensure Miss Chen's stability. If she shows any signs of corruption, or if the bond proves detrimental to pack function, more drastic measures may be necessary. The threat in her words was clear. If I became a liability, the Council would eliminate me to protect the greater werewolf community. It was a rational response to an unprecedented situation, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. That's acceptable, Marcus said before I could protest, his alpha authority making it clear the decision was final. Through our bond, I felt his determination to prove that he'd made the right choice, no matter what it cost him personally. The Council members exchanged final notes and meaningful glances before filing out of the meeting room, leaving Marcus and me alone with the weight of their ultimatum. 6 months to prove that my survival hadn't doomed us both. 6 months to understand what the bond between us was becoming. 6 months to learn how to live with the knowledge that my continued existence was a constant risk to everyone I loved. I should leave the pack, I said quietly once I was certain the Council members were gone. Find somewhere isolated where I can't hurt anyone if something goes wrong. Marcus spun to face me, his grey eyes blazing with an emotion so intense it nearly knocked me backward through our connection. Absolutely not. Your pack. You're mine. I didn't risk everything to save you just so you could run away at the first sign of difficulty. Marcus, you heard them. I'm dangerous. We don't know what this bond is doing to either of us. And if I lose control, you won't. He crossed to me in 2 quick strides, his hands coming up to frame my face with the same gentleness he'd shown when I was dying. I can feel you, River. Your thoughts, your emotions, your essential self. You're not changing into something monstrous. You're just more than you were before. The certainty in his voice was almost enough to quiet my fears. Almost. But the memory of the rogue's corrupted form lingered in my mind, a reminder of what I could potentially become if the venom reasserted itself. What if you're wrong? I whispered. What if the bond is blinding you to changes you should be seeing? For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Marcus's features, and I felt an echo of it through our connection. But then, his expression hardened into the determined mask of an alpha who had made his choice and would see it through to the end. Then we'll face whatever comes together, he said simply. But I won't let you face it alone. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of healing and adjustment. My shoulder mended with supernatural speed, leaving only a pale scar that matched the mark on Marcus's throat, permanent reminders of the night that had changed everything between us. Physically, I felt stronger than I ever had before, as if the bond was channeling some of Marcus's alpha power directly into my system. Emotionally, things were far more complicated. The connection between us grew stronger each day, until I could sense his moods from across the pack house and feel his presence even when he was out on patrol. It should have been invasive, overwhelming, but instead it felt like coming home after a long journey, as if some part of me had always been reaching for him without knowing what I sought. The pack's reaction to my survival and the bond was mixed. Some members looked at me with new respect, seeing me as someone their alpha had deemed worth extraordinary sacrifice. Others watched me with barely concealed suspicion, waiting for signs of the corruption they were certain would manifest eventually. Harrison tried to maintain normalcy, assigning me light tracking duties that wouldn't strain my healing body. But even he couldn't hide his concern about the changes he observed in both Marcus and me. We moved differently now, more in sync with each other, as if some invisible thread connected our actions and reactions. "It's getting stronger, isn't it?" he asked one evening, finding me on the pack house's back porch as I watched the sunset. "The bond." I nodded, unable to deny what was becoming increasingly obvious. "Every day. Sometimes I can barely tell where I end and he begins." "That's not normal," Harrison said gently. "Even the strongest mate bonds allow for individual identity. What you're describing sounds more like..." "Like what?" I prompted when he trailed off. Harrison's expression grew troubled. "Like the old stories, the legends about true soul bonds that transcended normal werewolf connections. But those are just myths, tales told to pups to explain why some mates seem perfect for each other." "Maybe," I said, though something deep inside me stirred at his words. "Or maybe Marcus and I are discovering that some myths have their roots in truth." As if summoned by our conversation, Marcus appeared on the porch, moving with the predatory grace that marked him as alpha. Even from across the space, I felt the instant easing of tension that his presence brought, as if some part of me had been incomplete until he arrived. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling beside me on the porch swing in a movement so natural it might have been choreographed. "Stronger," I admitted, leaning into his solid warmth without thinking. "Different," but not in the way the council fears. I can feel the wildness they're worried about, but it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels like potential. Marcus's arm came around me, and through our bond, I felt his mixture of relief and lingering concern. He was monitoring me constantly, I realized, using our connection to watch for any sign of the corruption that everyone expected to manifest. "The wildness isn't going away," he said quietly. "If anything, it's getting stronger, but it's not malevolent. It's like having a piece of the ancient forest living inside you, powerful and unpredictable, but not evil." Harrison cleared his throat, reminding us of his presence. "The pack is starting to talk about the way you two move together, the way your moods affect each other. Some of them are wondering if the bond is influencing pack dynamics more than you're admitting." I felt Marcus tense beside me, his alpha instincts bristling at the suggestion that he wasn't in complete control of his pack. Through our connection, I sensed his fear not of losing power, but of failing in his responsibilities to protect and lead our people. "What kind of talk?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Nothing treasonous," Harrison assured him quickly. "Just concern. They've noticed that you've been different since the bonding. More protective, more possessive. Some of the younger wolves are starting to test boundaries, seeing how far they can push before you react." The admission hung in the air like smoke, acrid and troubling. Pack dynamics were delicate things, maintained through a complex balance of respect, fear, and loyalty. If Marcus's behavior was changing in ways that undermined his authority, it could destabilize everything our people had built together. "I'll handle it," Marcus said, but I could feel his uncertainty through our bond. How do you address problems caused by something beyond your control? How do you lead effectively when your own judgment might be compromised by forces? You don't understand. We'll handle it, I corrected, earning surprised looks from both men. This bond affects both of us. We need to figure out how to manage it together, not pretend it's just Marcus's burden to bear. The following morning brought our first real test of that resolve. A young pack member named Devon had been pushing boundaries for weeks, challenging the authority structure in small but increasingly obvious ways. He chose the communal breakfast to make his boldest move yet, loudly questioning whether an alpha compromised by an heir. Unnatural bond. Was fit to lead the pack. The words hit the dining hall like a physical blow, conversations dying as every wolf present turned to see how Marcus would respond. Through our connection, I felt his flash of rage not at the challenge to his authority, but at the indirect attack on me. The protective instincts the bond had amplified roared to life, demanding immediate and decisive action. But instead of the controlled response of a seasoned leader, Marcus moved with the fluid violence of a predator. He was across the room before anyone could blink. Devon pinned against the wall with an alpha's hand around his throat. The display of power was impressive but concerning. This wasn't the Marcus I knew, the leader who preferred diplomacy to force. "You question my fitness to lead?" Marcus's voice carried the deep resonance of his wolf, making the windows rattle and every pack member present submit instinctively. "You think a bond that saved a pack member's life somehow weakens me?" Devon's face was turning purple, his feet kicking helplessly as he tried to breathe. Around the dining hall, other pack members watched in shocked silence, clearly disturbed by their alpha's disproportionate response to what had been verbal defiance rather than physical threat. I rose from my seat, moving carefully to avoid triggering Marcus's protective instincts further. Through our bond, I could feel the wildness inside him, not the calm authority of an experienced leader, but something more primal and dangerous. The connection between us was amplifying his protective instincts beyond reason, turning a political challenge into a perceived threat to my safety. "Marcus," I said quietly, approaching with the caution I'd use around any dangerous predator. "He's just scared. We all are. Let him go." For a moment, I thought Marcus might ignore me, might let his enhanced protective instincts drive him to actually harm Devon. But then our bond pulsed with shared awareness, and he seemed to remember where he was and who he was supposed to be. His grip loosened, allowing Devon to drop to the floor, gasping and coughing. "You're right to be scared," Marcus said, his voice still carrying that dangerous edge. "But never mistake caution for permission to undermine pack unity. Challenge my authority again, and you'll find out exactly how fit I am to lead." Devon nodded frantically, scrambling away as soon as Marcus stepped back. But the damage was done. Every pack member in the room had witnessed their alpha lose control, had seen how the bond was affecting his judgment and behavior. The looks they exchanged spoke volumes about their growing concerns. Later, in the privacy of Marcus's office, we faced the uncomfortable truth of what had happened. Harrison paced near the window, his beta instincts clearly torn between loyalty to his alpha and concern for pack stability. "That wasn't you out there," Harrison said bluntly. "The Marcus I know doesn't threaten pack members over verbal challenges. You could have killed Devon." "But I didn't," Marcus replied, though I could feel his own disturbed reaction to what had occurred. "I maintained control." "Barely," I interjected, earning sharp looks from both men. Harrison's right. That wasn't the reasoned response of an experienced leader. That was something much more primitive. The bond is affecting you in ways you need to acknowledge. Marcus turned to study me, his grey eyes searching my face as if looking for answers to questions he was afraid to voice. "And what about you? Are you telling me you felt nothing when Devon challenged us?" The truth was, I had felt something, a surge of indignation at the perceived slight, a desire to defend Marcus as fiercely as he'd defended me. But unlike him, I'd managed to recognize those feelings as foreign to my usual nature and suppress them before they could drive me to action. "I felt it," I admitted. "The bond wants us to protect each other above all else, even above pack welfare. But we can't let it control us. We need to learn to work with it, not be ruled by it." Harrison stopped pacing, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe that's the key. Instead of pretending the bond doesn't affect you, acknowledge it openly. Show the pack that you're aware of the changes and actively managing them." It was a reasonable suggestion, but implementing it would require Marcus to admit vulnerability in a way that went against every alpha instinct he possessed. Through our bond, I felt his struggle between the need to maintain authority and the growing awareness that his enhanced protective instincts were becoming a liability. "The Council's next check-in is in 2 weeks, Marcus said finally. "They'll be watching for exactly this kind of behavioral change. If they determine that the bond is compromising my leadership..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all understood the implications if the Council decided that Marcus was unfit to lead due to the bond. They would remove him from his position and potentially eliminate me as the source of the problem. Everything we'd worked for, everything we'd sacrificed, would be meaningless if we couldn't prove that the connection between us was manageable. "Then we have 2 weeks to figure this out," I said, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk with the determination that had made me the pack's best tracker. 2 weeks to understand what this bond is doing to us and learn how to control it, instead of being controlled by it. The research began immediately. Marcus's extensive library contained references to forced bonds and emergency healings, but nothing that matched what we were experiencing. The connection between us was deeper and more complex than anything documented in werewolf history, defying easy categorization or explanation. We started with meditation, trying to explore the bond structure through quiet contemplation. Sitting together in Marcus's study, we attempted to map the connection between us, to understand how our thoughts and emotions were flowing back and forth through channels that shouldn't exist. What we discovered was both fascinating and troubling. The bond wasn't simply a bridge between our minds, it was more like a merging, as if some essential part of each of us now resided in the other. When Marcus felt protective of me, I experienced it as my own emotion. When I felt concern for the pack's welfare, it became his priority as well. It's like we're becoming two halves of the same person, I murmured during one session. My eyes closed as I tried to trace the intricate patterns of connection that bound us together. I can feel your thoughts forming before you're consciously aware of them. And I know when you're about to speak before you open your mouth, Marcus replied, his voice soft with wonder and concern. This level of connection, it's unprecedented. Beautiful, but dangerous. The beauty was undeniable. Through the bond, I experienced Marcus's deep love for his pack, his fierce commitment to protecting those under his care, his constant struggle to balance strength with compassion. In return, he felt my analytical mind working through problems, my tracker's instinct for finding truth, my unwavering loyalty to those I considered family. But the danger was equally real. Our individual identities were blurring, our separate decision-making processes becoming tangled together in ways that could compromise both of our abilities to think clearly. If we couldn't maintain some sense of self within the bond, we risked losing everything that made us who we were. The breakthrough came during our 5th day of intensive study. We were practicing a visualization exercise meant to help us distinguish our own thoughts from each other's, when I felt something shift in the bond's structure. Instead of the chaotic merging we'd been experiencing, suddenly I could see clear channels of connection streams of emotion and thought that flowed between us, but remained distinctly separate. "Do you feel that?" Marcus asked, his eyes snapping open as the same realization hit him. The bond, it's not trying to merge us completely. It's trying to create harmony while preserving our individual selves. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze with growing excitement. Like a duet instead of a solo, 2 voices singing together but maintaining their own parts. The metaphor felt exactly right. What we had been experiencing as invasive merging was actually the bond's attempt to synchronize our natural rhythms while keeping our core identities intact. The key was learning to work with that synchronization instead of fighting it. We spent the next several days practicing what we came to call conscious bonding, deliberately opening ourselves to the connection while maintaining awareness of our individual boundaries. It was delicate work, requiring trust and communication on levels most wolves never experienced. But gradually, we learned to share emotions and thoughts while still being fundamentally ourselves. The results were remarkable. Marcus's protective instincts remained strong but no longer overwhelmed his judgment. He could feel my calm, analytical nature tempering his immediate reactions, while I benefited from his deep confidence and natural authority. Instead of being controlled by the bond, we were learning to dance with it. The pack noticed the change immediately. Marcus's responses to challenges became more measured, incorporating my tendency toward careful evaluation before action. Meanwhile, my own confidence grew as I drew on his alpha certainty, allowing me to take on more complex responsibilities within pack structure. But our newfound harmony was tested when the rogue returned. I smelled it first during an evening patrol, that same twisted scent of corruption and madness that had nearly killed me weeks before. My wolf bristled with recognition and fear, but this time I didn't face the creature alone. Through our bond, Marcus felt my alarm instantly, his own protective fury rising to meet the threat. "Where?" he demanded, appearing at my side with the supernatural speed that marked him as alpha. "North Ridge," I replied, already moving toward the scent trail. "Fresh, maybe an hour old. It's hunting again." This time, we didn't face the road unprepared. Marcus had mobilized our strongest fighters the moment he felt my distress through the bond, and within minutes we had a coordinated hunting party moving through the forest. But as we followed the creature's trail, a disturbing pattern emerged. The rogue wasn't just hunting randomly, it was specifically targeting wolves who had been near me since my recovery. Bethany, one of the healers who had helped treat my wounds, had been found mauled near the eastern border. Samuel, a young warrior who had expressed support for my survival, was missing entirely. "It's hunting my supporters," I realized with growing horror. Everyone who showed acceptance of what happened to me. Marcus's jaw tightened as he processed the implications. "It's trying to isolate you, make the pack turn against you by associating your presence with death." The psychological warfare was brutally effective. As word spread about the rogue's targeting pattern, I could feel the pack's mood shifting. Fear began to outweigh compassion, and whispers started about whether my survival was bringing a curse down on all of them. "Maybe I should leave," I said quietly, as we regrouped near the pack house. "If my presence is drawing it here, no." Marcus's response was immediate and absolute. "Running won't solve this. The rogue isn't just hunting random supportersets executing a plan. This thing has intelligence beyond what we initially credited it with." Through our bond, I felt his tactical mind working through the problem, analyzing patterns and possibilities with the same focus he brought to any threat against his pack. What he found was disturbing. "It knows about the bond," Marcus continued, his voice grim with realization. "It's trying to prove that saving you was a mistake by making your survival cost other pack members their lives. Psychological manipulation designed to turn everyone against you." The strategy was horrifyingly clever. Each death associated with my presence would make the pack question whether Marcus had made the right choice in saving me. Eventually, the pressure would become unbearable, and either I would leave voluntarily or the pack would demand my exile. Either way, the rogue would have achieved its goal of destroying the unity that made our people strong. "Then we end this," I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "We hunt it down and finish what started when it killed Cassandra." Marcus studied my face, and through our bond, I felt his concern for my safety, warring with his recognition that I was right. This couldn't continue every day. we allowed the rogue to operate freely, was another day our pack members lived in fear. Together, he said finally. But we do this smart. No charging off unprepared like last time. The plan we developed was both simple and complex. Using me as bait, we would draw the rogue into a confrontation on ground of our choosing, where Marcus and a team of our best fighters could end the threat permanently. It required precise timing and perfect coordination, but most importantly, it required trust in the bond that connected us. I would venture out alone, following the creature's trail, until it became aware of my presence. The rogue's obsession with me would ensure it couldn't resist the opportunity to finish what it had started, but this time Marcus would be close enough to intervene before the creature could do any real damage. The dangerous part was that I would have to genuinely be at risk for the trap to work. The rogue was intelligent enough to sense deception, which meant I couldn't have obvious backup nearby. Marcus would have to trust our bond to alert him when I needed help, while I would have to trust that he would come when I called. If something goes wrong, Marcus said, as we prepared for the hunt, if the bond fails, or you can't reach me, then I die fighting instead of running, I interrupted. But that won't happen. I have faith in us. The confidence in my voice surprised us both. When this all began, I had been ready to die quietly from rogue venom, accepting my fate with resigned grace. Now I was volunteering to face that same creature again, trusting in a bond I barely understood and an alpha whose protective instincts had nearly compromised his leadership. But that was exactly why it would work. The rogue expected fear, expected me to behave like a victim. Instead, it would face someone who had been transformed by survival, someone who carried wildness in her veins and an alpha's strength flowing through an unprecedented bond. I set out alone as the sun began to set, following the rogue's scent trail deeper into the forest than any single wolf should venture. Behind me, Marcus and his fighters moved in carefully coordinated patterns, close enough to respond quickly, but far enough away to avoid detection by the creature's enhanced senses. The trail led toward the old-growth section of our territory, where massive trees created a canopy so thick that sunlight barely penetrated to the forest floor. Here, among the ancient giants, the rogue had made its Lara cave system that reeked of death and corruption. I didn't have to wait long. The creature emerged from the shadows like a living nightmare, its form even more twisted than I remembered. Weeks of feeding on pack wolves had made it stronger, more coherent, but also more obviously mad. Its eyes held a malevolent intelligence that spoke of cunning and cruelty in equal measure. "Little wolf returns to die properly this time," it said, circling me with predatory grace. "No alpha to save you here, no miracle bonds to cheat death." "I didn't come here to be saved," I replied, allowing my own wolf to rise closer to the surface. The wildness that everyone feared stirred in my chest, not the corruption of rogue venom, but something cleaner and more dangerous. "I came here to end you." The rogue laughed, a sound like breaking bones, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in its expression. I didn't smell like the terrified victim it had faced before. The bond with Marcus had changed me in ways that went beyond simple healing, and the creature was beginning to realize that the easy prey it had expected might not exist anymore. "You think your alpha's power makes you strong?" it snarled, abandoning subtlety for direct attack. "Let me show you what real strength, looks like. The rogue lunged with devastating speed, but this time I was ready for it. Instead of trying to dodge or flee, I met its charge head-on, my enhanced strength and reflexes allowing me to match its movements. We crashed together in a tangle of claws and fangs, rolling across the forest floor in a deadly embrace. Pain flared as its claws found flesh, but the wounds were superficial scratches rather than the deep tears it had inflicted during our first encounter. Through our bond, I felt Marcus's surge of alarm and determination as he sensed my distress and began closing the distance between us. But I didn't need rescue this time. The wildness in my blood sang with fierce joy as I fought, not the madness of corruption, but the primal satisfaction of a predator meeting its match. My claws found the rogue's throat, digging deep enough to draw the black ichor that passed for its blood. The creature's confidence shattered as it realized that I wasn't the same wolf it had defeated before. In saving my life, Marcus had changed me into something the rogue couldn't categorize or predict. Not pack, not rogue, but something entirely new. "What are you?" it gasped, trying to break free from my grip. "I'm what happens when an alpha refuses to let his pack member die," I replied, my voice carrying harmonics that didn't belong to any normal wolf. "I'm what happens when love is stronger than venom." With a surge of strength that surprised us both, I pinned the rogue to the ground, my claws positioned to tear out its throat. For a moment, the creature lay still beneath me, its mad eyes showing something that might have been fear. "You could join me," it said desperately. "The wildness in you, it's not pack nature. It's something else, something that could grow stronger. We could hunt together, make the other packs pay for their weakness." For just an instant, I felt the temptation it offered. The wildness in my blood responded to the suggestion of freedom from pack constraints, from the careful balance of civilization and nature that defined werewolf society. I could feel how easy it would be to let that wildness consume me, to become something beyond rules and responsibilities. But then Marcus's presence blazed through our bond, not with possessive demand, but with absolute trust. He wasn't trying to control me or pull me back. From the edge, he was simply offering his strength as an anchor, if I chose to use it. The choice was mine, as it had always been. "I am pack," I said simply, and ended the rogue's existence with a single, decisive strike. The creature's death sent shockwaves through the forest, its corrupted essence dissipating like smoke in a high wind. Where it had lain, only normal earth remained, as if the forest itself was eager to forget the contamination that had poisoned this place. Marcus arrived moments later with the hunting party, but the battle was already over. He found me sitting beside the spot where the rogue had died, my human form unmarked, except for the shallow scratches that were already healing. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands moving over me with gentle thoroughness as he checked for injuries. "No," I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. The confrontation had changed something fundamental in me, settling the wildness that had been restless since my recovery into something more stable and purposeful. I felt complete in a way I hadn't since the night Marcus saved my life. Through our bond, I sensed his relief and pride, along with something deeper that made my heart skip. The way he was looking at me had nothing to do with duty or responsibility, and everything to do with emotions he hadn't yet put into words. "The pack will want to see proof. Harrison said practically, studying the spot where the rogue had fallen. They need to know the threat is ended. They'll have it, Marcus replied, but his eyes never left my face. River's scent carries the truth of what happened here. Everyone will know she faced the creature that had been hunting us and won. The walk back to pack territory passed in contemplative silence. Our hunting party moved with the satisfied exhaustion of warriors who had seen a threat eliminated, but I found myself thinking about what came next. The rogue was dead, my stability was proven, and the council's concerns about my potential corruption had been definitively answered. But what did that mean for the bond between Marcus and me? What did it mean for the feelings that were growing stronger every day? Feelings that had nothing to do with forced connections and everything to do with genuine attraction and respect. The pack's celebration of the rogue's death was subdued but heartfelt. Too many of their friends and family had died for anyone to feel truly jubilant, but the relief at being able to walk their territory safely again was palpable. As word spread about my role in ending the threat, the suspicious looks I'd been receiving shifted to something more complex respect, mixed with a healthy wariness of what I had become. "You've changed again," Harrison observed during the impromptu gathering in the pack house's main hall. "Not just from the rogue's death, but something deeper. You carry yourself differently." He was right. The wildness that had felt foreign and potentially dangerous since my recovery had settled into something that felt like an extension of my natural self. I was still pack, still loyal to our people and our values, but I was also something more. Something that could stand against creatures like the rogue and emerge victorious. "The bond is stabilizing," Marcus said quietly, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of the pack's ceremonial wine. "Can you feel it? The connection between us isn't growing stronger anymore, it's finding its permanent form." I accepted the wine and considered his words. He was right. The frantic intensity that had characterized our bond in its early days had calmed into something deeper and more sustainable. I could still feel his emotions and thoughts, but they no longer threatened to overwhelm my own identity. Instead, they had become part of the complex harmony that defined who I was becoming. "What does that mean for us?" I asked, the question carrying weight beyond simple curiosity. Marcus's grey eyes searched my face, and through our bond, I felt his careful consideration of the words he was about to speak. "It means that what's between us is no longer just about survival or magical necessity. It means we have choices to make about what we want this to become." The implication hung in the air between us, charged with possibility and uncertainty. The forced bond had saved my life and connected us in unprecedented ways, but what we did with that connection now was entirely up to us. We could maintain it as a practical partnership, using our enhanced communication and shared strength for the good of the pack. Or we could acknowledge the deeper feelings that had been growing alongside the magical connection and see where they might lead. "I need some air," I said, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the celebration around us and the weight of the decisions we were facing. "Will you walk with me?" Marcus nodded, setting down his untouched wine and following me out onto the pack house's wraparound porch. The night air carried the scents of home pine forests and cooking fires, the comfortable musk of pack members settling in for the evening, the clean smell of mountain streams running through our territory. We walked in comfortable silence toward the edge of the cleared area around the pack house, where cultivated gardens gave way to wild forest. Here, under the canopy of stars visible through the trees, we could speak freely without being overheard by curious pack members. "When you saved my life," I began, choosing my words carefully, "you said I was worth everything. Did you mean that?" Marcus stopped walking, turning to face me fully in the dappled moonlight. "Every word. River, when I saw you dying from that rogue bite, when I realized I might lose you before we ever had a chance to explore what could be between us, it nearly destroyed me." The admission hit me like a physical blow. Not because it was unexpected, but because it confirmed what I had been sensing through our bond for weeks. The feelings between us weren't just a product of magical connection, they had roots that went deeper than either of us had initially acknowledged. "You felt something for me before the bite," I said, the realization settling into place with startling clarity. "That's why you were willing to risk everything to save me. Not just because I was Pack, but because I was. Because you were the woman I had been falling in love with for months," Marcus finished, his voice rough with emotion. "The tracker who could find truth in impossible situations. The Pack member who cared more about others' welfare than her own safety. The person who made me want to be a better leader and a better man." My heart hammered against my ribs as his words sank in. All this time, I had assumed that any romantic feelings between us were artificial products of the forced bond. But Marcus was saying that the attraction had existed first, that the bond had simply amplified and revealed emotions that were already present. "I thought you saved me out of duty," I whispered. "As an alpha, protecting his pack, I saved you because losing you would have meant losing the most important part of my world," Marcus replied, stepping closer until I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "The bond didn't create what I feel for you, River. It just made it impossible to hide." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability he was showing by admitting these feelings, made something crack open in my chest. Through our bond, I could feel the truth of his words, the depth of emotion he had been carrying for far longer than either of us had realized. "I love you too," I said, the words emerging with startling ease. "Not because of the bond, but because of who you are. The leader who puts his pack before his own safety. The man who was willing to risk everything for someone who might not survive anyway. The alpha who never uses his power to intimidate, but always to protect." Marcus's eyes flashed with something that might have been relief or joy or both. "Then what happens now? The council expects us to maintain professional distance, to prove that the bond isn't compromising pack function. Then we prove that love makes us stronger leaders, not weaker ones," I replied, surprised by my own certainty. "We show them that what's between us enhances our ability to serve the pack, not undermines it." The words felt right as soon as they left my lips. What Marcus and I shared wasn't a weakness or a distraction, it was a source of strength that made both of us more effective in our roles. His confidence bolstered my natural caution, while my analytical nature tempered his protective instincts. Together, we were better than either of us could be alone. Marcus reached up to cut my face in his large hands, his thumbs tracing the line of my cheekbones with infinite tenderness. "Are you sure? Once we acknowledge this publicly, there's no going back. The council will scrutinize every decision we make, looking for signs that emotion is compromising judgment. Let them watch," I said, leaning into his touch. "They'll see that what we have makes us better, not worse. They'll see that love guided by wisdom is the strongest foundation any leader can have. Marcus's smile was like sunrise after the longest night, brilliant and full of promise. Then we stop pretending that this is just a magical accident and start building something real together. When he kissed me, it was nothing like the desperate connection we had shared during the bonding ritual. This was conscious choice, deliberate affection, the meeting of two people who had found something precious in each other and were brave enough to claim it. Through our bond, I felt his love flowing like warm honey, sweet and golden, and absolutely certain. The kiss deepened, and with it came the realization that this was just the beginning. We had survived road venom, council scrutiny, and the complications of an unprecedented magical bond. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, not as alpha and pack member forced into connection, but as partners who had chosen love over fear. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against mine. The council's final evaluation is next week. After that, assuming they clear us for normal pack function, we can start planning our future. Our future, I repeated, tasting the words and finding them perfect. I liked the sound of that. The evaluation came sooner than expected. 3 days later, the council arrived unannounced, clearly hoping to catch us in some compromising display of poor judgment or emotional instability. Instead, they found a pack running more smoothly than it had in years, with an alpha and his chosen mate working in perfect harmony to address their people's needs. Councilwoman Elena's expression grew increasingly frustrated as she interviewed pack members and found universal praise for how Marcus and I were handling our responsibilities. Even Devon, the young wolf who had challenged Marcus weeks earlier, admitted that the alpha's recent decisions had been both fair and effective. The bond appears to have stabilized into something beneficial rather than disruptive, Elena concluded during her final meeting with Marcus and me. Your pack members report feeling more secure and better LED than before the incident. Whatever this connection between you has become, it seems to be serving your people well. Thank you, Councilwoman, Marcus replied formally, though I could feel his relief through our bond. We've worked hard to ensure that our personal connection enhances rather than compromises our pack duties. Elena studied us both with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Personal connection. Is that what we're calling it now? We're calling it what it is, I said calmly. A bond forged in crisis that grew into something deeper. Marcus and I love each other, and that love makes us better leaders. The admission caused a stir among the council members, but Elena simply nodded as if she had expected as much. Love can be a strength or a weakness, depending on how it's managed. In your case, it appears to be providing the former. The council will continue monitoring your situation, but we're satisfied that you pose no threat to Cruxty, Werewolf, society. With that, our ordeal was officially over. The council departed with formal efficiency, leaving Marcus and me free to build the life we had chosen together. That evening, Marcus announced our relationship to the pack during the traditional monthly gathering, his words carrying the weight of both personal joy and official policy. River and I have found something in each other that makes us both stronger, he told the assembled wolves. Our bond will continue to serve this pack as it has since the night it saved her life as a source of unity and strength rather than division. The pack's response was overwhelmingly positive. These were people who had watched us work together for weeks, who had seen how our connection translated into better leadership and more effective protection for all of them. They understood that what we shared was an asset to their community, not a liability. The formal mating ceremony took place a month later, under the full moon that had always been sacred to our kind. But unlike traditional werewolf matings, this one acknowledged the unique nature of our bond, not just the joining of two wolves, but the celebration of something unprecedented and precious. Harrison officiated, his words carrying the weight of friendship and genuine happiness for our future. "Marcus and River," he said, as we stood before our pack under the silver light, "you have already proven that your bond can weather the greatest storms. Tonight, we celebrate not just your love for each other, but your commitment to letting that love strengthen our entire community." The vows we exchanged were simple but profound, acknowledging both our personal feelings and our shared responsibility to the pack that had supported us through our trials. When Marcus slipped the traditional silver band onto my finger, I felt the bond between us pulse with renewed warmth, as if it were blessing the choice we had made. "I love you," he whispered, as we kissed to seal our union, his words meant for my ears alone. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we're given together." "And I love you," I replied, my heart full to overflowing with joy and certainty. Not because of fate or magic or necessity, but because of who you are and who we become together. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, with pack members sharing stories, songs, and the kind of heartfelt joy that comes from witnessing something truly special. As the sun rose over our territory, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Marcus and I stood together on the pack house porch, watching our people begin another day in the home we had fought to protect. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, his arm around my waist, as we observed the peaceful scene. I considered the question seriously, thinking about everything that had brought us to this moment. The rogue bite that should have killed me, the forced bond that had saved my life, the council's scrutiny that had tested our resolve, the love that had grown from impossible circumstances into something beautiful and real. "Only one," I said finally, earning a surprised look from my new husband. "I regret that it took nearly dying for us to find each other. We could have had more time." Marcus's laugh was rich with affection and relief. "Then we'll have to make the most of the time we have now. Starting with today. Starting with today." I agreed, leaning into his warmth as our pack began the daily routines that would carry them through another peaceful day in the territory we protected together. Through our bond, I felt Marcus's contentment and love, emotions that echoed and amplified my own, until it was impossible to tell where his happiness ended and mine began. But that was exactly as it should be to you people who had found in each other not just love, but partnership, not just passion, but purpose. The wildness that had once frightened everyone, myself included, had settled into something that felt like coming home. I was still River, still the tracker who could find truth in impossible places. But I was also something more. I was the woman who had survived rogue venom and council scrutiny, who had learned to dance with a bond that defied all precedent, who had found love in the most unlikely circumstances. Most importantly, I was the mate of an alpha who had been willing to risk everything to save me, not because duty demanded it, but because love required it. That love had transformed us both, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either of us could have imagined. As the sun climbed higher, warming the mountain air, and promising another day of peace for our people. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The bond that had begun as a desperate act of salvation had become the foundation of a partnership that would endure whatever trials the future might bring. And if other wolves whispered about the unprecedented nature of our connection, if scholars studied our bond as an example of what was possible when love transcended conventional wisdom, if young wolves looked to our story as proof that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the greatest threats, well, that was fine with me. I had been bitten by a rogue that should have killed me. My alpha had refused to let me die, forging a bond that changed us both in ways no one had thought possible. What had emerged from that crisis wasn't just survival, but transformation. Not just healing, but wholeness. Not just life, but love. It was, I reflected, as Marcus turned to kiss me in the morning light, exactly the kind of impossible story that was worth every moment of pain it had taken to create. We had faced the worst that could happen to wolves like us and found something beautiful on the other side. Now, all that remained was to live that beauty, one day at a time, for as long as we were given together. And judging by the strength of the bond that connected our hearts and souls, that would be a very long time indeed. The morning brought its usual responsibilities, patrol schedules to review, pack business to address, the endless details of leadership that required both our attention. But now we handled these tasks as true partners, our enhanced communication allowing us to work with an efficiency that impressed even Harrison. "You two are starting to make the rest of us look bad," he complained good-naturedly as we wrapped up the weekly pack meeting in record time. "How are we supposed to maintain our reputations as dedicated leaders when you make everything look so easy?" "Practice," Marcus replied with a grin that held all the satisfaction of a man who had found his perfect car. "Match. Lots and lots of practice." Later, as evening fell, and our pack settled into the comfortable routines of home, Marcus and I took our customary walk through the territory we protected together. The forest that had once held nothing but danger now felt like an extension of our home, each tree and stream a part of the legacy we were building for future generations. "Do you think there will be others like us?" I asked as we paused by the creek where I had once tracked Rogue Spore. "Other bonds that break the rules everyone thought were unbreakable?" Marcus considered the question, his hand warm in mine, as we stood listening to the peaceful sounds of water over stones. "Maybe. Love has a way of finding solutions that logic says are impossible. If there are other wolves desperate enough to risk everything for someone they can't bear to lose, well, they might discover that the heart is stronger than any venom." The thought was both comforting and sobering. Our story had a happy ending, but it had required suffering, sacrifice, and risks that could easily have destroyed us both. We had been extraordinarily lucky in ways that others might not be. "Then we'll be here to help them," I said, the decision feeling as natural as breathing. When someone else faces what we faced, when another alpha has to choose between following the rules and saving someone they love, we'll show them that impossible things are sometimes just improbable ones waiting for the right cacker. Circumstances. Marcus squeezed my hand, his love and pride flowing through our bond like warm honey. "Always thinking about others. It's one of the million reasons I fell in love with you." "Only a million?" I teased, bumping his shoulder with mine. "I was hoping for at least 1,000,001. His laughter echoed through the forest, a sound that had become as much a part of home as the scent of pine needles and pack musk. As we turned to walk back toward the warm lights of the pack house, I marveled at how completely my life had changed. 6 months ago, I had been a tracker, valued for my skills, but living on the periphery of pack hierarchy. I had been content with that role, finding satisfaction in work well done and the knowledge that my abilities served people I cared about. Love had seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford, a distraction from the duties that defined my worth. Now I was mated to the most powerful alpha in our region, bound to him by ties that transcended normal werewolf connections, transformed by experiences that had rewritten everything I thought I knew about what was possible. But more than that, I had found in Marcus not just a partner, but a perfect complement, someone whose strength enhanced my own and whose love made me braver than I had ever imagined I could be. The rogue bite that should have killed me had instead become the catalyst for the most important transformation of my life. What had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something far more precious than mere survival. As we reached the pack house, and Marcus held the door open for me, his eyes full of the promise of all the tomorrows we would share, I knew that I would never regret the path that had brought us here. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it had been worth it for this moment, this man, this life we were building together. Inside, our pack was settling in for the evening, secure in the knowledge that their alpha and his mate would guard their dreams. Children played in the common areas while their parents discussed the day's events. Elders shared stories by the fire. Teenagers tested boundaries in the way young wolves always had and always would. It was home in its truest sense, not just a place, but a collection of hearts and souls bound together by loyalty, love, and shared purpose. Marcus and I had fought to protect this, bled to preserve it, nearly died to ensure its continuation. Now we would live to see it flourish. As we climbed the stairs to our private quarters, I reflected on the words I had spoken during our mating ceremony, the promise to let our love strengthen our entire community. It was a vow I intended to keep for all the days of our lives, however many we were granted. Behind us, the pack house settled into its nightly rhythm, the sounds of home and family drifting through walls that had witnessed joy and sorrow, triumph and loss, the full spectrum of life lived in community with others. Ahead of us lay whatever the future held, challenges and victories, ordinary days and extraordinary moments, the steady accumulation of experiences that would define our legacy. Through it all, we would face everything together, not as alpha and pack member forced into connection by desperate circumstances, but as mates who had chosen each other freely and completely. The bond that had saved my life had become the foundation of our shared future, proof that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unlikely soil. I had been bitten by a road that should have killed me, but my alpha had refused to let me die, and, in saving my life, he had given us both something infinitely more precious than mere survival. He had given us love in all its messy, complicated, absolutely perfect glory. And that, I thought, as Marcus drew me into his arms in the privacy of our bedroom, was worth every moment of everything we had endured to find it. The future stretched ahead of us, full of promise and possibility, challenges and joys we couldn't yet imagine. But whatever came, we would meet it together, two hearts beating in harmony, two souls bound by choice as much as by fate, two wolves who had learned that sometimes the most impossible things are simply the most necessary ones, waiting for the courage to make them real. 6 months after our mating ceremony, the first test of that philosophy arrived in the form of a young wolf named Sage, who stumbled into our territory half dead from what appeared to be another rogue attack. But when our healers examined her wounds, they found something that chilled everyone to the bone bite marks that carried the same corrupted scent pattern we had learned to associate with the creature Marcus and I had killed. "It's not possible," Harrison said grimly as we stood around Sage's bed in the medical wing. "We destroyed that rogue. I saw you kill it, River. There was nothing left, but the evidence before us suggested otherwise. Sage's injuries were healing slowly, far too slowly for a normal werewolf, and her temperature spiked dangerously high every few hours. Most disturbing of all, her scent was beginning to change in subtle ways that reminded me uncomfortably of my own transformation months earlier. "Tell me exactly what happened," Marcus said gently, sitting beside Sage's bed with the kind of careful attention he gave to all pack members in distress. Through our bond, I felt his determination to solve this puzzle, tempered by genuine concern for the young woman's welfare. Sage's voice came out as barely more than a whisper, her strength sapped by whatever poison was working through her system. "I was travelling with my birth pack through the neutral territories. We'd heard rumours about rogue activity, but the council said the threat had been eliminated. Then they came out of nowhere, 3 of them, working together like they were coordinated. 3 rogues hunting as a pack. The implications of that sent ice through my veins. Rogues were supposed to be solitary creatures, driven mad by their own corruption and incapable of the cooperation required for group tactics. If that was changing, if they were somehow organizing, describe them, I said, moving closer to the bed. Were they like the creature that attacked me? Large, powerful, obviously changed by years of corruption. Sage shook her head weakly. No, these were different, smaller, newer, like they hadn't been rogues for very long, but they moved together, almost like they were following someone's orders, and when they bit me... She shuddered, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. It felt different from what I've heard about normal rogue venom, colder, more deliberate. Marcus and I exchanged troubled glances. What Sage was describing suggested that someone, or something, was deliberately creating new rogues, teaching them to hunt in coordinated groups, rather than allowing them to devolve into the mindless monsters expected. It represented a fundamental shift in how rogue threats operated, one that could destabilize the entire werewolf world if left unchecked. "How many in your birth pack?" Harrison asked quietly. 15, Sage replied, and the simple word carried devastating implications. I'm the only one who escaped, the only one left. The weight of that loss settled over the room like a shroud. 15 werewolves, an entire small pack, wiped out by creatures that weren't supposed to be capable of such coordinated destruction. Somewhere out there, 3 new rogues were potentially creating more of their kind, spreading corruption in patterns we didn't understand. "We need to contact the council," Marcus said, his alpha authority making the decision final. If there are organized rogue groups operating in neutral territories, every pack in the region needs to know about it. But even as he spoke, I could feel his reluctance through our bond. The Council's response to organized rogue activity would likely be swift and brutal hunting parties dispatched to kill anything that showed signs of corruption, regardless of whether those creatures could potentially be saved. After what we had experienced with the forced bond and my own recovery, the thought of destroying beings who might be rescued felt increasingly wrong. What if we could help them? I said quietly, voicing the thought that I knew Marcus was also considering. What if the same principles that saved me could be applied to newly turned rogues before the corruption becomes irreversible? Harrison's expression grew alarmed. River, you're talking about attempting forced bonds with creatures that are actively hostile. The risk might be worth it, Marcus interrupted, his tactical mind already working through possibilities. If we could develop a way to reverse early rogue corruption, it would revolutionize how we handle these threats. Instead of just killing them, we could potentially save them. The idea was both breathtaking and terrifying in its implications. What we were discussing would require extensive research, careful experimentation, and risks that could easily destroy anyone foolish enough to attempt it. But if it worked, if we could find a way to pull newly corrupted wolves back from the brink of madness, it could change everything. First, we save Sage, I said firmly. She's been bitten, but she's not showing signs of the complete corruption that marked the rogue I fought. If we can forge a stabilizing bond with her before the venom spreads too far, we might be able to prevent her transformation entirely. The problem was that Marcus and I were already bonded to each other in ways that had never been documented before. Whether he could establish a similar connection with another person without damaging what we shared was completely unknown. We would be venturing into uncharted territory with no guarantee of success and significant potential for catastrophic failure. I'll do it, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. If anyone understands what Sage is going through, it's me. I've survived rogue venom once already. Maybe that experience will make it easier to forge a healing bond with her. Marcus's protective instincts flared through our connection, his immediate response to reject any plan that put me at risk. But beneath that automatic reaction, I felt his recognition that my suggestion made sense. The bond between us had changed me in ways that might make me uniquely qualified to help other venom victims. Absolutely not, he said aloud, even as his emotions conveyed reluctant consideration. We don't know what attempting to bond with Sage would do to you, or to what we share. I won't risk losing you to save someone we might not be able to help anyway. And I won't let someone die when I might be able to save them, I replied, matching his authoritative tone with my own determination. Marcus, this is bigger than just Sage. If we can prove that early rogue corruption is reversible, we change the entire paradigm of how our society handles these threats. The argument that followed was intense but brief, conducted mostly through the bond that connected our thoughts and emotions. Marcus's fear for my safety warred with his recognition that I was probably right, while my determination to help Sage battled against my own uncertainty about what we were proposing to attempt. In the end, it was Sage herself who settled the matter. As our debate grew more heated, she stirred on the medical bed, her fever-bright eyes focusing on our faces with startling clarity. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying the desperation of someone who could feel darkness closing in around her. "I can feel it happening. the change starting inside me. If you think there's a way to stop it, I'm willing to try anything. I don't want to become like the things that killed my family. The raw honesty in her plea cut through all our theoretical discussions and brought us back to the fundamental question: could we live with ourselves if we didn't try to save someone who was asking for our help? We do this carefully, Marcus said finally, his alpha authority making it clear that any rescue attempt would follow his guidelines. Minimal risk to River, maximum preparation, and we stop immediately if anything goes wrong. The preparations took most of the day, with our healers setting up monitoring equipment and establishing protocols for every possible complication they could imagine. Marcus and I spent hours in meditation, exploring the structure of our own bond to understand how a similar connection might be established with Sage without damaging what we shared. What we discovered was both encouraging and concerning. The bond between us had evolved into something remarkably flexible, capable of accommodating additional connections without losing its essential character. But forming a healing bond with a rogue venom victim would require me to open myself to corruption in ways that could potentially spread to Marcus through our existing link. The risk is manageable, I insisted, as evening approached and we prepared for the attempt. Your strength will anchor me, just like it did when I was dying. But this time, I'll be conscious and able to control how much of Sage's corruption I take on. Marcus's hands were gentle but firm as he positioned them over my heart, just as he had done during my own crisis months earlier. Promise me, he said quietly. Promise me that if this starts to go wrong, you'll sever the connection and save yourself. I promise, I replied, though we both knew that in the heat of the moment, such promises were difficult to keep. But it's not going to go wrong. I can feel it, Marcus. This is what we're meant to do. The bonding attempt began at sunset, with me placing my hands over Sage's fevered heart, while Marcus maintained his connection to me. The moment I opened myself to her pain, I felt the venom coursing through her system like liquid fire, seeking to corrupt everything it touched. But this corruption was different from what I had experienced during my own poisoning. Where the mature rogue's venom had been concentrated and aggressive, this felt more like an infection virulent but still vulnerable to the right kind of treatment. Through the bond with Marcus, I drew on his strength and began the delicate process of surrounding Sage's corruption with healing energy. The work was exhausting, requiring absolute concentration as I carefully extracted poison from her system while preventing it from spreading to me. Several times I felt the corruption try to take hold in my own body, only to be burned away by the pure connection I shared with Marcus. His love and strength flowed through me like cleansing fire, making it possible to touch the darkness without being consumed by it. Hours passed in a blur of focused effort. Gradually, I felt Sage's fever breaking, her laboured breathing easing as the venom lost its grip on her system. When the healing bond finally stabilized, she was sleeping peacefully for the first time since her arrival, her scent carrying no trace of rogue corruption. It worked, Harrison breathed, his voice filled with wonder as he checked Sage's vital signs. Her temperature is normal, her healing is accelerating, and she smells completely like Pack again. But the real test would come when Sage woke up. Clearing the venom from her system was only the first step. We wouldn't know if the process had been completely successful until we could assess her mental state and behavioral patterns. When Sage opened her eyes the next morning, They were clear and rational, showing no signs of the madness that characterized rogue transformation. She sat up carefully, testing her strength, then looked around the medical wing with obvious relief. "I feel like myself again," she said, her voice stronger than it had been since her arrival. "The darkness that was spreading through me, it's gone. How is that possible?" "We're still figuring that out ourselves," I admitted, settling into the chair beside her bed. "But what matters is that you're going to be fine. The corruption has been completely purged from your system." Over the following days, Sage proved that the healing had been genuinely successful. She showed no signs of rogue influence, no behavioral changes that suggested lingering corruption. If anything, she seemed to have emerged from the experience with enhanced emotional stability and a deeper connection to her wolf nature. "You've given me back my life," she said during one of our conversations. "But more than that, you've shown me that there's hope for others who are facing what I faced. That has to count for something." She was right, of course. The successful healing of Sage's rogue corruption proved that early intervention could prevent the transformation that everyone had assumed was inevitable. But it also raised questions about how such techniques could be implemented on a larger scale, and whether the Council would accept such radical departures from established policy. The answer came sooner than expected. Word of Sage's recovery had spread through unofficial channels, reaching the Council's attention within days of her healing. This time, when they arrived for an unscheduled visit, their demeanor was more curious than suspicious. "We understand you've achieved something unprecedented," Councilwoman Elena said during their formal inquiry. "A complete reversal of rogue corruption in a recently infected individual. The implications of such a technique are significant. We believe it represents a new approach to handling rogue threats," Marcus replied carefully. "Instead of simply destroying corrupted individuals, we might be able to save some of them, particularly those who haven't been lost to madness for extended periods." Elena's pale eyes shifted between Marcus, me, and Sage, who had been asked to attend the meeting as evidence of the technique's effectiveness. "And this process requires the participation of someone who has survived rogue corruption themselves?" "It seems to," I acknowledged. "My own experience with the venom appears to have given me some resistance to its effects, making it possible for me to safely extract corruption from other victims." The Council members exchanged meaningful looks, and I felt a chill of apprehension. What we had accomplished was undeniably beneficial, but it also made me valuable in ways that could easily become problematic. If the Council decided that my abilities were too important to risk, they might try to control how and when I used them. "We propose a controlled study," Councilwoman Elena announced after a whispered conference with her colleagues. "Selected cases of recent rogue corruption, carefully monitored and documented, to determine the full scope and limitations of this technique. Miss Chen would work under Council supervision to develop protocols that could eventually be taught to other qualified healers." The proposal was reasonable on its surface, but through our bond, I felt Marcus's immediate wariness. Council supervision often meant Council control, and the idea of being separated from me for extended research periods clearly troubled him. "That would be acceptable," Marcus said diplomatically, "provided that River remains based in our territory and any research subjects are brought here for treatment. Our PAC's medical facilities are well equipped for such work." It was a clever compromise, maintaining our autonomy while giving the council the oversight they required. After some negotiation about specific protocols and reporting requirements, an agreement was reached that satisfied everyone involved. Within weeks, our pack territory had become an unofficial center for rogue corruption research. Carefully selected victims were brought to us for treatment, each case teaching us more about the limitations and possibilities of the healing technique we had developed. Some patients were too far gone, their corruption too advanced for reversal. Others responded beautifully, emerging from treatment with renewed health and no lingering effects from their ordeal. Gradually, we began to understand the parameters that determine success or failure, developing guidelines that other healers could eventually follow. "You're changing Werewolf Society," Harrison observed one evening as we reviewed the latest batch of treatment reports. 10 years from now, rogue attacks won't be automatic death sentences. Families won't have to lose loved ones to corruption that could be reversed. The thought was both humbling and inspiring. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save my own life had evolved into something that could help countless others. Marcus and I had become pioneers in a field that didn't exist before our bond was forged, explorers charting new territories of what was possible when love refused to accept conventional limitations. But perhaps the most satisfying development was watching Sage flourish in her new role as my assistant and fellow corruption survivor. Her own experience with near transformation gave her unique insights into what patients were experiencing, while her naturally empathetic nature made her invaluable in providing emotional support during the healing process. "I never thought I'd be grateful for being attacked by rogues," she said one day as we prepared for another treatment session. "But if it hadn't happened, I never would have found my true calling. I never would have learned that I could help others the way you helped me." Her words resonated with my own journey of transformation. Like her, I had discovered that survival was only the beginning, that the real purpose came in using our experiences to benefit others who faced similar challenges. As the months passed and our success rate continued to improve, I found myself thinking about the road that had originally attacked me. In killing that creature, I had ended a threat to our pack, but I had also destroyed something that might have been saved if we had known then what we knew now. "Do you think it suffered?" I asked Marcus one night as we lay in bed, listening to the sounds of our territory settling into sleep around us. "The rogue that bit me, do you think there was still enough of its original self left to feel pain about what it had become?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the thoughtfulness he brought to all ethical dilemmas. "I think," he said finally, "that it was probably grateful to be released from whatever hell its existence had become. But I also think that if we had known then what we know now, we might have tried to save it first." The conversation led to discussions about establishing protocols for attempting communication with rogues before resorting to lethal force. Guidelines for determining which creatures might be candidates for healing versus those too dangerous to approach. It was complex work, requiring balancing compassion with practical safety considerations. But it was work that felt meaningful in ways that simple patrol duties never had. Every life we saved, every family reunited with a loved one who had been thought lost forever, was proof that sometimes the most important breakthroughs came from refusing to accept that certain tragedies were inevitable. The first anniversary of our mating approached with a sense of celebration and accomplishment. Our pack had grown stronger, Our territory was more secure, and our research had already saved dozens of lives across multiple regions. Most importantly, the bond between us had deepened and matured into something that felt as natural as breathing. "What do you want for our anniversary?" Marcus asked as we planned the celebration that would mark both our personal milestone and a success of our healing program. "More time," I replied without hesitation. "More years together, more chances to help people who need what we've learned, more opportunities to explore what else might be possible when love refuses to be limited by conventional wisdom." Marcus's smile was radiant with joy and promise. "Then that's what we'll build together. More time, more love, more impossibilities made real through the simple act of refusing to give up on each other." As our anniversary celebration began that evening, surrounded by pack members whose lives had been touched by our journey and patients whose futures had been rewritten by our techniques, I reflected on how completely my world had changed since that night in the forest when rogue fangs had pierced my flesh. I had been ready to die then, accepting my fate with resigned grace. Now I couldn't imagine a life more full of purpose and meaning. The venom that should have killed me had instead become the catalyst for discoveries that would benefit werewolf society for generations to come. Standing in Marcus's arms as our pack celebrated around us, I knew that the greatest gift we had been given wasn't just survival or even love, though both were precious beyond measure. The greatest gift was the knowledge that when faced with impossible choices, sometimes the answer that seemed most unlikely was actually the one that would change everything for the better. The rogue that bit me had been trying to destroy something beautiful. Instead, it had helped create something extraordinary. And that, I thought, as Marcus spun me around the dance floor, to the accompaniment of pack laughter and celebration, was exactly the kind of impossible transformation that made life worth living.